Working Cows Podcast, episode 287. This episode is brought to you by C90 Ocean Minerals.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the C90 Ocean Minerals studios. And this episode is brought to you by C90 Ocean Minerals. Do you want to grow healthier, more nutrient-dense food this season? Introducing the C90 Growers Series, a new line of mineral and trace element products perfect for your home, garden, and homestead. Give C90 Grower Series a try and be amazed at the improved quality and taste of your fruits and vegetables. Tomatoes that taste like you remember growing up are possible again by ensuring they have access to all of nature's macro and trace minerals. C90 Growers Series is also a powerful microbiology booster for compost and compost teas, dramatically increasing their strength and potency. C90 Growers Series launches Friday, March 24th, and listeners of the Working Cows Podcast can receive 20% off the new lineup with code GROWCOWS. Or visit us at www.c-90.com/growcows. Again, to get 20% off the new lineup, you can use code GROWCOWS at c-90.com. Very excited to be joined today by Jay Young. Jay is a seed stock producer from Kansas, and I was usually, when I'm at my best, and listeners of the show reach out to me through the contact page, I will usually respond by saying something like, let me know if I can serve your family with a specific episode topic or guest. And recently had a listener of the show reach out and say, hey, I'd love to hear from Jay Young in Kansas. He's doing some great things with compost and compost teas and compost extracts and applying them to fields. And so I said, hey, let's talk to Jay about these things. So that's why we're talking to Jay today, is to learn from him what he's learned over the last few years of implementing these processes on his seed stock operation. Young Red Angus. You can find more out. You can find out more about them at youngredangus.com. So Jay, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Clay.
Just a note: there is a homeschool cooperative meeting going on outside the doors of my office, so you might hear some hymns being played on the piano in the background or kids running to and fro, but it's all good.
It is good.
So. Had a listener reach out to me, and as I generally do when a listener reaches out, I say, how can I serve your operation with a specific episode topic or guest? And somebody mentioned your name and your name in connection with the use of compost extracts and some of those things. So I guess can you kind of paint the picture of the difference that compost extracts have made as far as the financial bottom line is concerned on your operation, and how that's played out?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on. I think that the first direction that I'd like to go is explaining it to people, because some people, when I start talking about compost extract, their mind immediately goes to composted manure. And I think that for people to understand, when we're thinking composted manure, people are doing that mainly to get the benefit of the nitrogen and phosphorus from the composted manure. And I think it's important for people to understand the reason why we're applying compost extract. So an extract is, let me back up even further, the composting system. So this is called Johnson Sioux compost. It is a fungally dominant compost. As far as I know, it's the most fungally dominant compost that they've come up with making so far. The big ones that are going around in the farming and agricultural communities are, I think Elaine Ingram's is probably the biggest. Johnson Sue's probably catching it because of for different reasons. But Elaine Ingram's is a thermal aerobic pile. And so it's a composting pile that you turn multiple times. So it's like you put it in a pile in a they'll do concrete wire and they'll put the compost in there. And so they'll have like a green source, high nitrogen source, and a carbon source, and I think and some other things. But anyway, they turn that multiple times once it hits 160. And then there's Korean natural farming, which I don't know a lot about. There's spice composting, which I don't know a lot about. There's vermicomposting, again, which I don't know a lot about it. I know it's more bacteria dominant, but in the end of the day, what I'm doing with Johnson Sue, that's pretty much a verma compost, but it's a year. You don't turn it all. So, and the worms do the work, but it takes a year. So Johnson Sue is done. The way I do it is I'll take an IBC tote and I'll take 3 of them. So picture the IBC tote. I'll take the brackets off the top and I'll pull the bladders out of those IBC totes. And then there's 5 sections on those IBC totes, and I'll cut out that middle section to where there's 2 bars or 3 bars, the top bar, a middle bar, and a bottom bar on the IBC tote, and I'll line those with weed barrier mat, and then I'll take 3 of them and I'll zip tie them together and I'll stack them on top of each other. And I've got a YouTube channel that I document all this stuff pretty well. If you guys want to go to Young Red Angus on YouTube, you can find any of my videos on this, or grazing cattle on cover crops, or any of that stuff. And so anyway, we'll stack 3 IBC totes lined with weed barrier mat on top of each other, the 3 sections. And then I'll put 5 4-inch PVC pipes through the center of that are 5 feet tall to go all the way through. And then you fill it with a higher carbon source than nitrogen. I try to pick a nitrogen source and a carbon source and fill them that way. My best ones I've made are 60% corn stalks, 20% grass clippings, 10% horse manure, and 10% wood chips. And so end up be 70% carbon between the wood chips and the corn stalks. And I run the corn stalks through a wood chipper or a bale grinder. And so anyway, I'll get those wet, and you want to get like 70% by volume water wise. If you have a feed wagon and you don't add the manure, it's a good way to mix some of those carbon sources. But anyway, so you can weigh the water on there if you're using a feed wagon. If you don't, and you want to just kind of eyeball it, you want to squeeze that and have 2 droplets of water coming out of your knuckles. And in the end of the day, when you fill it, if you have water running out the bottom after the first day, it's too wet. And so you just need you start watering those a gallon of water every single day. If you got water coming out the bottom, you just back it off a little bit. And that's what I do. And I found the gallon of water a day is Dr. Johnson's method that made this composting method along with his wife, Wei Chin Sue Johnson. So they recommend a gallon every day. In my environment, a gallon's too much. So I just back off and, water enough to where it's not coming out the bottom. That ends up being, once they broke down quite a bit, it's like half a gallon every other day. So that's how you make the compost. You put it in those bioreactors, and after a day, you pull the pipes so air's flowing through there. That compost is going to hit anywhere from, I'd like them to get up to 130, and then they'll get to 160 degrees, and then they'll cool off between 5 days to 3 weeks. And then once they cool off, you add 100 worms. I recommend doing 100 earthworms and 100 composting worms. Dr. Johnson recommends composting worms. I've done earthworms ever since I started them, and this year is the first year I'm going to add composting worms. I've been told by Dan Razier of Fed and Happy that you can add, or you can use both of those. Dan Razier with Fed and Happy would be a good one to have on your show as well. I buy compost from him just to have extra compost on our deal, and he makes it in a really unique way, similar to Johnson Sioux. But he's got a Cessna, abandoned Cessna building there in Hutch, Kansas, where they used to build planes during World War II. So he's got 5,000 tons of this compost on the floor of this old Cessna building. So anyway, I buy some compost from him. And if you guys are getting your compost started and you want to inoculate it with good compost, he's one to buy from. But other places I recommend buying from him, Soil Works sell a good compost, but those are great places to get compost. When in a year, if you're doing Johnson Sioux, it breaks down in a year, and that's what some people don't like, is that it takes a year for it to break down. But it takes so long for it to break down because the worms are going through that. And, the worm's gut biome is full of phosphorus, potassium. It's not as high in nitrogen. It's got good nitrogen in it, but it's mainly phosphorus, potassium, and calcium, which is the biggest thing that you're getting from that. And their gut biome is so amazing. And like they'll have nematode eggs in their gut biome. So these bioreactors are full of nematodes and protozoa and all the things that a healthy soil system needs to function. And that's where we're getting at with applying it. So in a year, I'll take 1 pound of compost and I'll mix that with 4 gallons of water, and I'll apply that in furrow, 8 gallons an acre. If you want to see the system I use to break this down on a large scale, you can go to my YouTube channel, and this machine's called a Bio 5 extractor. I'm going to also build other extractors to see if I can kind of tweak designs on it and stuff. But you basically picture a big container that has a filter in the center. It's a round shape, and it's got a filter in the center that's 4 inches from the side, and we're like talking like 60 inches in diameter. And then that filter sits just a few inches from the sidewall. So you dump the compost in the center. So I'll dump 125 pounds of compost in there when it's full of water, and it holds about 70 gallons of water. So the air starts blowing up through the bottom of this machine. And so once the water's blown through that for 20 minutes and bubbles and breaks apart the compost, I turn on the clean water, and then a pump that pumps clean water onto it. And then I turn the pump that pumps it out, and those are both on the side. So it kind of creates a vortex of going from, in a circular, it sucks it off in a circular motion. And so I'll be able to make 500 gallons in one shot in about 30 minutes from this extraction process. And so then I'll take that 500 gallons and we'll put it in furrow when we're planting corn. And so we've raised 200 bushel corn in 2022 on a 5-acre test strip without applying nitrogen or phosphorus. And we raised 207 bushel corn this year on a 5-acre test plot without applying nitrogen phosphorus. And our most profitable results were we raised 248 bushel corn with half the nitrogen, 90 pounds of nitrogen, and no phosphorus. And so the reason that's possible is because we've been over applying nitrogen and phosphorus for so long. Phosphorus has a negative charge to it. So as soon as you put it in your soil, it immediately wants to bind with something in your soil. So in our soils, it binds with calcium. I believe the byproduct is bicalcium phosphate. But anyway, so we have a ton of that in our soils that's not available to the plant. The calcium's not available and the phosphorus is not available. And so when you apply this compost extract, it's got ours that we tested 2 years ago had 365 species of fungus, or 365 species of bacteria and 305 species of fungus. 83% of those, so 300 and some of them, are well over that actually on the nitrogen side. 83% of those bacteria and fungus species made inorganic nitrogen plant available.
Yeah.
So on that test that we had, I can't remember the exact numbers, But I mean, we have 30 some years of nitrogen in our soil stockpiled from over a plant. It was like 3,000 pounds of nitrogen. But it needs to be made that's organic nitrogen, and the plant has to break it down to where, I mean, the bacteria and the fungus have to break that down and bring it to the plant. And so we also have it's like, I think it's 49% of make phosphorus available, 49% makes potassium available. And then I don't remember what calcium was, but it's in there in the middle range. It wasn't as high as nitrogen. But anyway, all of these bacteria and fungus, like large amounts of them, make the nutrients that's in our soil available to the plant. So right now, the way a plant functions in our unhealthy agricultural system is we till up the ground. We don't, but in most agriculture in the United States is under tillage. Tillage kills earthworms. It kills the large amounts of species of fungus. It definitely destroys mycorrhizal fungus, which is immensely important, and it leaves it to where it's bacteria dominant in very few species. The species that can thrive are there, and so leaves you with bacteria dominant soils. So what a plant's normal function is a plant, when you put a seed in the ground, it immediately starts to put out its root system, and it wants to put out exudates. So an exudate is the fine root hairs that you should see on a healthy root system, and those exudates secrete a glomulin, which is full of carbon, and those carbon that has sugar, or that's a sugar-based form of carbon, binds the soil together, and so it forms little balls to your root. And so when you pull up your root structure, it should have dreadlocks on it. It should look like dreadlocks. And so anyway, in our systems, our roots are bare. If you pull them up, they're unlikely to have anything on them. Now, in my early years, I would when in getting into regenerative agriculture, I would pull up my roots and I'm like, oh, they're bare. Well, I pulled them up too fast. What you want to do is you want to get a shovel and break it out and take the roots like that and look at the roots that way. If you're in a dry area, you can do that. They're probably not going to stick. So what I would do is I would break it out, get as much of the root system as you can if you're doing regenerative agriculture, and get them wet. And then you can compare them to grass in your ditch or somewhere where the grass is not being that's growing normally. If you have overgrazed pastures, it's not going to work because overgrazed pastures will also not have exudates. But anyway, you should, once you remove all the dirt from the root system, you should see tiny fine root hairs off your roots. And I've done this. I've compared my cereal plants growing to my neighbor's cereal plants growing, and the roots will be bare and mine will have fine root hairs. And so that's what it's doing, is it's building back our healthy system. It's bringing the micronutrients to the providing the plant with the micronutrients it should have in a natural system, where we're doing things naturally. It's, whether people believe in evolution or, like we've talked before the podcast, Clay, where we believe in a creator, it was a perfect design. Right. We don't need to be adding to the design. We need to try to do it in the way that it was designed.
Today, the show notes page for today is workingcows.net/287. If you're interested in what Jay's talking about, checking out his YouTube channel. He does a great YouTube live program. He's had the Johnson Sioux team on there before to break some of these things down and talk through them and stuff like that. So definitely go check that out. It'll be in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/287. And just kind of breaking down some of what you shared there, that, I guess the benefit to the financial bottom line is fairly obvious when you start talking about the fact that you're creating a fungally dominated extract that is capable of going into the soil and kind of reorienting those relationships so that nitrogen becomes plant available. And there's lots of research that says that we've got plenty of nitrogen in the air above the ground if we can get the soil in a place where those azobacter can do the work that they're designed to do of making that nitrogen available. And you talked about that too, that aggregated soil, getting those pore spaces opened up and able to allow the penetration of the different resources that we need in out of the air or wherever they're coming from, but it takes pore space, it takes open spaces to be able to make that happen. And so that's an important thing. And like I said, the financial benefit just becomes obvious at that point, because you're not having to apply as much of these things because the soil is healthy and those things are those relationships are being restored. Have you been seeing that happen on your operation as far as those relationships and the restoration? Or maybe the better question is, how long has this process taken? What's that process been like for you?
So it's fairly easy to see the difference in our irrigated ground because you can change things a lot quicker. Water makes everything grow. So for example, like I've found one earthworm on our dry land ground where we've been doing this for like not the extracts. The extracts, we've been on that ground for 2 years, but that field's been continuous crop with living roots over the summer for 7 years. And we just now got one earthworm back. And that's the hardest soil health principle to get going here, is living root in the ground at all times. I'm going to try some stuff this year with interseeding cover crops that has like red clover and annual ryegrass that will overwinter and hopefully keep some of that biology going. But I did that last year and it germinated and died because it was so dry. So it's a challenge. But on our irrigated ground, we went from having no earthworms because we were applying nitrogen up to 2000 ammonium anhydrous form of nitrogen up to 2015, I think, on those. And so, and anhydrous is terrible for your ground and it kills earthworms. But we found our first earthworm on these irrigated circles in 2020, and the Kansas Farm Bureau awarded us with a conservational award, a conservational practices award, and they came out to make a video about it. And I was making the comment that 24 earthworms per square foot and this was from the 90s, is worth like $30 an acre. And I was like, I can't imagine what it's worth now, or what that evaluation would be now. And they're like, well, how many do you have? I was like, I don't know. I got a shovel. Let's find out. So I dug up with them on the spot a square shovel out of the ground about what I guessed was a square foot. There's 50 earthworms in that one shovelful, where we didn't have any in 2020. So wow. That was the late fall of 2022. So in 2 years, we went from nothing to a lot. I've talked to several guys in Western Kansas that it's just hard to bring back the earthworm population. But, this movement of compost extracts is fairly new, but it's wildly popular. I feel like my YouTube channel is fairly amateur. I'm still learning how to edit videos and get better at all of that and make quality videos for people that are going to help them with what they're doing. And I mean, to have 9,000 subscribers just based on what we're doing with rotational grazing and Johnson Sioux and cover crops, I think shows the popularity of regenerative agriculture. And it has me really, really excited about what the future holds. I guess, but to finish up that question, sorry, I kind of went everywhere on that, but as far as what we've seen, I have people come out and they say that they can tell the difference on my farm ground and other people's farm ground when they walk out on it, seeing the top few inches of the soil really changing is awesome. Even though I was just one earthworm, seeing earthworms come back on dry land where people say you won't ever find them. And just being able to reduce your input cost of we're applying half the nitrogen we used to apply, and we didn't apply any phosphorus in 2022. And I don't plan on ever applying it again, just because we have so much stockpiled in our soil. And I feel like by the time my descendants have to apply it, they'll have found a better source of phosphorus.
For sure. For sure. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the process. You kind of went through the process there as we got started here, but you mentioned a couple of things as far as the different composting systems, and you're using the Johnson Sioux composting system. Would you say that this system is less labor intensive than other systems where you have to go out and turn those? I think I've seen them in windrows quite a bit, where you have to go out and turn those windrows regularly.
I think it's a less labor intensive up front, but I mean, you got to remember to water them every single day. You can't let them dry out. And if you're in a really cold environment, if you can't bring them inside, it ends up not even really being an option. We devoted a shed that's heated to them to keep them from freezing so that you keep the biology alive. And people are like, well, what did that cost you? And I'm like, well, it saved me $200,000 in input costs. So one shed is in 1 year of $250,000 in input. It wasn't that high. It was 200, like just under 200,000 for the nitrogen bill, but it was close to 40,000 for the phosphorus. So I think it was a 230. I can't remember the exact number, but ridiculous amounts of money that we're saving in input costs. I can afford to dedicate one shed, to the extracts. And the thing I love about it is it's really not that big of a deal either way. To me, it's not that big of a deal to build a system to keep your compost from freezing. It's also not that big of a deal to call Dan Razier Fed and Happy and buy compost, or Soil Works and buy a compost, or buy somewhere compost from a reputable person. There's a guy named Don Lori that out of Arkansas that sells Johnson Sioux, and David West out of Colorado sells Johnson Sioux. So if you search them in a Google search, you'll find those two guys, and you can buy. I mean, there's places all over to buy good compost. Sure. So
no, I bet the inside of that shed smells really good too. Compost smells good when it's active.
Oh, dude, that's the cool thing about Johnson Sioux. Is that it because it never goes anaerobic, it doesn't smell. So like there's a fermenting kind of smell at the very beginning that's faint, you got to, but once it cools off, there's no smell to it. If the Johnson Sioux compost smells, you did something wrong. And I've done that. I've had them go anaerobic, and, over time they'll fix themselves. But once they go anaerobic, they're going to be a bacteria dominant compost. Your end product, which corn loves bacteria dominant soils, and if you're growing GMO corn, then you're bacteria dominant compost is not terrible. Vermicompost is bacteria dominant. So that's another cool thing we're going to do. We're planting Jimmy Red corn this year, and I'm hoping to figure out how to successfully grow heritage corns in our area so that we're having a better product to feed to our cattle. And then also for human consumption. And, GMO corn is just not a healthy plant to be consumed by cattle. So I'm hoping that we can figure, that out, and that, that movement of moving away from GMO. GMO is great because it's feeding the masses. It's just not a nutrient dense product. Right. And if we want to, I don't think it's bad it's great that we got the GMOs and we're able to figure out how to feed people affordably, but now we need to find out a way to feed people affordably that's also healthy, and we can't pretend like it's healthy.
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned inoculation. What's the purpose of inoculation? What's the importance of it?
Great question. Yeah. So when you are thinking of inoculation, like when you're inoculating like something that I think people understand that grows soybeans, you have to inoculate those legumes with the bacteria. And everybody is like, well, legumes fix nitrogen. No, legumes have a relationship with nitrogen fixing bacteria, and they specialize in it better than other plants, but they don't fix nitrogen. They hold the nitrogen in the nodules, but that nitrogen is brought there by the bacteria and the fungus that it has a relationship. Specifically, I think more with legumes, it's more bacteria. So you want to inoculate those seeds with bacteria that's gonna help the legume fix nitrogen. It's the same kind of thing with the compost. You're inoculating it with bacteria and fungus that's going into the compost. So it's like when I'm thinking about inoculating it with Fed and Happy's product, I'm getting the bacteria and fungus that's already in Dan's compost into my composting machine, my composting bioreactors, and that's going to start the process going a lot quicker.
Sure. So what is actually run through the inoculation process? Is it your compost that you're inoculating with somebody else's, or how is that working?
Yeah. So when I make my, when I first did mine, I inoculated my compost with one of my mentors' compost. And so that's how I started. But now whenever I do a pile, like I'll take a little bit of my old compost and I'll inoculate, I'll make an extract and I pour that extract in the compost as it's being made. And then after it goes through the heating process and it's cooled off and the worms are first put in there, I'll make another extract and I'll put that in the top, just to be getting the benefits from the older compost getting started in the new compost. It's kind of like the whole process of yeast and bread and taking that dough and putting it in there.
What are the temperatures necessary for this process to continue? You mentioned that's
one of the controversial things. So like, Dr. Johnson has made some with just wood chips and it only got 80 degrees. So Elaine Ingram's camp thinks that because you're not killing off the bad pathogens, that's not a good way to make compost. I'm kind of towards the school of thought that you want it to get above 120 so that it is killing those pathogens. It's either 120 or 130. I have a hard time finding a sweet spot there because I thought, I didn't want it to get 160 because I thought then it would be too hot. But I've been told by Wei Chin Sue Johnson that 160 for 3 weeks is not bad. It'll eventually cool off and be fine. And they know more than I do. So I know people will out there that disagree with it, but I'm not a composting expert. I've just learned their system and I do it.
Sure. Yeah. And so kind of the idea is the external temperature, like where it is outside, doesn't matter as much as if you're keeping the internal temperature of that actual reaction in the right zone, then it's going to be good. But in my environment, that probably means it's going to have to spend some time inside of a shed so that it can stay in that temperature zone. Is that?
Well, yeah. And I think if, in your environment, you'd probably want to start it in May and then, let it go through the whole process over the summer. And then when, you get your first freeze, October or September?
Yeah. Somewhere in there.
Yeah. So like I would just start bringing it in then. I know I've had mine freeze. I don't think it's that big of a deal to freeze. It just hinders the growth of the compost because, once it cools back off, those spores will come alive and the fungus would come back alive unless you freeze it so hard that you kill all the worms in it, which in your area probably would happen because it gets really dang cold up there. But I think, I know somebody in Ohio that had one, left it outside and it snowed 4 feet of snow on top of his bioreactor, and it didn't end up working out. It didn't end up making good compost. So
yeah, that could be as much because of too much water ended up going down in it as anything. Especially if it's warm and that snow's melting as it falls, you get a lot more water than you wanted down in there. So yeah, let's talk about how I guess I got one more question before we move on here. You mentioned the Bio5 extractor. Was that specifically developed for this process? Was that a tool that was specifically?
No. So the Bio5 is a compost that I don't know where they're all getting it from, but I've looked at it under a microscope with John Neiswanger, my mentor, and it has a ton of fungal spores in it. So it's basically something that's going to get activated as it goes through. And I think that they've confirmed that there's 40 different species of fungus. So it's not as fungally dominant. I do know it's full of, it has a lot of humic in it. And I find that it's a product that does what you need it to do. I did an irrigated circle of corn after we pulled oat or beardless trip bales off, and we planted corn in middle of June, which is late for us. And we only put down 100 pounds of nitrogen, no phosphorus, and 8 gallons an acre of the Soil Works product. We have to use a machine and break down their product, which is a Bio5. So it's basically, the same process, just a different product. And we had 19 tons an acre off that circle with half the nitrogen that we would normally apply after pulling off bales that did not get nitrogen. So, or phosphorus. So, I think that there's a lot of unique products out there that people can use if they want to do this without, taking the time to figure out how to make Johnson Sue. If you want to take the time to learn how to make Johnson Sue, it's not rocket science. Any farmer can do this. It just, my thing is what are your preferences are. If you don't want to pay anybody else any money, then make your own. If you have an issue with keeping it from freezing and you don't want to water it every single day, then probably better buy a good product out there. But I think, and that's the other thing that's going to need to happen is there's going to need to be companies in every single community that start making extracts and compost and stuff to start being able to provide this movement. Because I feel like the compost extract movement and people realizing how much money they can save in input costs will change the game, and that we're going to see a lot more move and a push to move to regenerative agriculture because of this, because of the amount of money people are going to save. People are going to realize how it's in their pocketbook. And then with that, they'll realize how good it is for the environment, and then they'll become more environmentally conscious, which is what happened to me.
Right.
Yeah. I guess that's not really accurate. Like, I got into it because the cattle, it's not, I always kind of overlooked the environmental side of things and just thought that the people that were crying about the environment were just the commie pinko liberals that, whatever. And then now, as I've been going on this journey of realizing how important it is to be a good steward of the ground that God has given me, then I'm a lot more environmentally conscious, and I get called by other conservatives, commie pinko lib, which I am not. But
right. Well, and I think that whole environmental discussion is more about control. It's about controlling people and food supplies and so many of those things that I can believe all the things I believe about what it means to take good care of the soil, and I don't have to say, in light of those things, the government needs to decide who plants what, when, where, why, and how.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, so those are two totally separate discussions in my mind, and I'm with you on that for sure. You mentioned.
It's funny on the YouTube channel though. Like, I've gotten comments from people that say that I'm a plant by the liberal media to circumnavigate people's common sense and to get people to convince the government to outlaw fertilizers. And I said, well, you can come to my farm anytime you want. And the guy's pass, like, I know what this is. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's like, okay, God gave us a system whereby we can give the soil what it needs, because what you're doing there's no part of what you're doing that's synthesized in a lab, as far as the compost, making the compost and extracting the nutrients from it so that it's in a form that can be put on the soil. No part of that was involved any technology really. And so all of it could be done without technology. You could stir that thing into a pot with a stick if you had to, probably, and so it's just I've my whole journey has been kind of that realization, like, well, there were how many thousand years of human history prior to the industrialization of our food system and our farming systems and every other system, where people got by and figured out how to do some of these things that we just forgot because we've turned over so much of our systems to the industrialization of it all. We've just said, well, the industrialization makes it faster, bigger, and cheaper, and so let's just let them run it. Well, there was, all of human civilization before the late 1800s got by without industrialization, so we can probably still get by without it if we need to. Which, back to our discussion, geopolitical fights and supply chains, we've all seen how those things can affect prices of synthetic inputs and those kinds of things. And so this is another reason to be self-sufficient and be able to take care of yourself and get some of those things done. So let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today. And this episode is brought to you by C90 Ocean Minerals. Do you want to grow healthier, more nutrient-dense food this season? Introducing the C90 Growers Series, a new line of mineral and trace element products perfect for your home, garden, and homestead. Give C90 Grower Series a try and be amazed at the improved quality and taste of your fruits and vegetables. Tomatoes that taste like you remember growing up are possible again by ensuring they have access to all of nature's macro and trace minerals. C90 Growers Series is also a powerful microbiology booster for compost and compost teas, dramatically increasing their strength and potency. C90 Growers Series launches Friday, March 24th, and listeners of the Working Cows podcast can receive 20% off the new lineup with code GROWCOWS. Or visit us at www.c-90.com/growcows. Again, to get 20% off the new lineup, you can use code GROWCOWS at c-90.com. Yeah, so you mentioned the cattle, and at the end of the day, you're not just growing things to have something nice green growing out there that's fun to look at. You're growing it for a purpose. How are you guys capturing the value of what you're growing with these processes that we've been discussing?
Sure. So my journey kind of began into regenerative agriculture in 2016. When I heard about, I watched a YouTube video with Gabe Brown talking about grazing cattle on cover crops. And I watched that and I was immediately hooked because we would run stockers. We would buy them in October, November, and we'd sell them, when they hit 800 pounds. And I always loved that more than I love the farming aspect of it. But I live in the county that has the least amount of grass per acre in the state of Kansas. And so that's just not really an option to just go out and, make an effort to get grass in my county. And so when I found out you could raise a cow-calf operation on cover crops, I was like, man, I'm going to do that. And that's the other funny thing is just like, I thought that was going to be something that was pretty common, is seeing guys do cow-calf operation just on their farm ground. And I'm sure there's somebody else out there doing it besides us. I just haven't met them yet. I want to meet them and, brainstorm with them. But so in our system, I got started with a small, 15 pairs and a bred heifer program. And now we have 175 cows. Most of those are registered. And if they're not registered, I put embryos in them from our best cows to build our genetics. And so, from 2016 to 2020, the main reason I cared about cover crops was to raise my cow-calf operation on them. And I liked the soil health and everything else, but that was secondary to, running cows. And so when I realized that I was on my soil health because I was still applying phosphorus and nitrogen, and that was hindering root exudate development, and it was slowing down the whole process of being regenerative and healing my ground. That's when I really started looking into the scientific side of things. And, before I grew up, I have dyslexia. So reading is really a challenge for me. And so I've always kind of assumed if there's a room of 100 people, I'm in the bottom 10% as far as knowledge, wisdom, and I'm just probably one of the people in the room. And, that really changed, as I began to read, the word and realize what God said about me was, and what he says is true, what the word of God says about wisdom. And so, I really just started applying myself to acquire wisdom and knowledge and understanding of what really takes place within our soils and how our soils function. And so that I felt like if I do that, then I'll be a better steward of everything I've been given, and I'll be able to raise better forage for my cattle, which is what I'm all about. And so, when we're that the whole process of getting in this was for the cattle. And so, the guys who influenced me early on were focused on the mama cow. And so that's something I've been focused on from the beginning, and it's something I continue to be focused on. And the longer I've done it, the more I've realized that so many people say that that's important to them, But at the end of the day, the latest, greatest sire seems to be more important to them. And unless you know that cow family, what that cow family's done, and I don't know how you can build a cow herd. And I don't think that's bad to have one sire be, something that's new and the latest to be able to compare the rest of your cow herd to. But I feel like the majority of what you should be using for your herd should be proven sires if you're a seed stock person, because you need to be the one who's making sure that your customers have cows that are going to last a long time in their herd, because that's what works for them. They don't need to be getting rid of their cows when they're 4 years old because their feet are falling apart, because their bags are not good, or because they're not fertile. And so I think that that's really key. And the other thing, I think environment plays a huge role in it. I know a really popular grass, a producer that's really popular with people who are all about grass finishing beef, and they are great phenotype, beautiful cattle. I've got a neighbor that bought 30 of them, and the first year he only had 70% conception rate on 60 days on those cows, because they got to his environment and his environment was not conducive to those, 25% of them. And they did last. And now he's got those, and they're 10 years old on the ones that lasted. But I think that, this operation that is phenomenal in so many areas, did not work in his environment in Western Kansas. And I think that, something that's a reality for me is I need to make sure that I'm buying genetics that are the seed stock guy that I'm buying them from as well is a short calving window, that doesn't supply a lot of forage, because I know most of those genetics are going to translate well in other environments. And so when you put in fertility, you put in udder and teat quality, you put in structure, you put in foot structure, it's really, really difficult to breed cattle for the commercial cattleman, because there's so many things that can knock a female out of your program, and you have to have that higher standard. And so that's why I put in a lot of embryos, because I'm so picky with my cows that I'm going to make sure that I'm moving forward with my best cows.
Right. Yeah. I think that bringing other people's genetics to your zip code and letting your zip code call them is a kind of expensive way to find the cows that fit in your environment. Is that kind of what I hear you saying? I think that it is, but I mean, you also still need to be that's the other thing. Some of these programs that are really big into regenerative agriculture, they use very few genetics, and they're still, even though I think they're right that a majority of people are not as hard on their own genetics as they are, and that, you need to find the ones that work in your environment. I think we get in, like, at least in the regenerative circles, we get this mindset that we can do it better in our environment. And I think for the most part, that's true, but it's also arrogant. And it also keeps us from finding something that somebody else may have produced that's better than what we produced, and will get our herd going in the right direction had we just tried it. Sure.
So that's what I'm saying is like, I think a small amount of your genetics need to be coming outside of your herd, from a herd that you've researched, that those cow lines and how hard they push their cattle. But I think that, for the most part, you should still be bringing in some outside genetics into what you're doing, just to see if you're still on top of your game. Now, if year after year after year, you're finding the ones that you carefully, meticulously picked over time don't hold up to your own stuff, then sure. Then, I mean, if you want to shut it down, close down and have a closed herd. But I think that there's challenges with that. And I think that, sometimes people can't see the forest for the trees.
Sure. Well, I think I really appreciate what you said about cow families, and then the value of outcrossing to somebody else's herd, because I've heard Steve Campbell talk about that. That really that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck, is if you've spent that time finding those good cow families in your own operation, and then you bring in those outside genetics from somebody else who's been doing the same thing. You really see that. That's one of the bigger levers we can push genetically, the way I understand it. At least that's how, like I said, that's how I understand it. is those outcrosses are a big part of it. So to that end, you've been raising some bulls and selling some bulls. How many bull sales have you guys had, or has this been something that has been going on for generations?
So no, the cow, we started our cow calf operation in 2016. When I started researching, raising cows, I realized that seed stock guys in general were fairly passionate about what they do. And I'm a fairly passionate person. I give my best effort to doing it. So as I started thinking about that, I'm like, man, I would want to raise cattle that benefited other people's lives and that had a solid reputation to them. And so I got the opportunity to be a cooperator with a guy in Colorado. And after doing that for a few years, I realized I wanted to do it on my own. And so we had our first bull sale in 2020, the perfect year to have a bull sale in the middle of COVID. And then we've had one, this will be our fourth bull sale. And so, our main focus is moderate framed animals. Our cows weigh about 1,300 pounds. And that's when they're extreme. Like our cattle are always extremely fleshy because they're on cover crops year round. So their average is 1,350 on high quality forage. My high seller from last year's sale, the dam weighed 1,150. So I typically run fairly moderate framed females. And I'm not pigeonholed to that. If I know that there's a bull that I really like that's proven himself, that's a 6-frame bull, I don't mind using a 6-frame bull. It'll kind of depend on what I pair it to in my herd. But I think, there's some really proven bigger framed bulls out there that I think that work in my program. It just, the majority of my cows, I want to stay at 5.5 frame, weighing that 1,300 pound range. And I need to reweigh them this year because I've gotten rid of some of my bigger recip cows. My biggest cows, I had 5 cows that weighed between 15 and 1,900 pounds that were all recips, and those are all gone. So I'm guessing that there's those 5, and I had a handful of others, and a lot of my bigger cows are going down. So I'm guessing my size, my weight and size of cow has gone down as well.
Sure. Yeah. So tell me about the bull sale coming up March 29th and 30th. How is that going to work?
Yeah. So it's an online auction through DV Auction. It lasts 24 hours and you can bid on every single bull at the same time. I love that for the customer because, if you've ever been at a bull sale and you have 3 bulls that you like and you only need one, you may have given up on the one early only to find out you had to pay $3,000 for the next bull that you may not like as much as the one you'll let go early. So I like that for the customer because they're able to get the bull they want for the price they want, and you can bid on every single one the entire sale. So it's low pressure, and I like that. Our bulls are, I used a black bull called Jet Black a few years ago. So we'll have the first red calves out of that Jet Black bull. Those are eating our sell off there. That's our highest sire group. I used a bull called Ridge Admiral that came from Flatwater Gang. Milk Creek bought it, and Bruce Ketchum of Milk Creek has used that bull every year since he's bought it, and the bull's 10 now. So we're on, 9 years of him AIing to that bull. I've got several females I bought from Bruce out of that bull. He's a female maker. So I'm excited about those. We got some 5L genuines. They have a nice udder placement and 5L real deals and several other groups I've really seen a difference this year in the bull's quality from top to bottom as far as foot quality. Making sure I'm finding out the animals that I'm AIing to and their foot structure has really paid dividends this year. I feel like with our foot quality and our sale.
Yeah. And you mentioned early on here, a focus on the female, and talk to me a little bit about that. What does that mean to you? What are you intending to do there?
So, specifically, like now I've got a cow that has one of the real deal sons in the sale. That cow is 9 now, and her udder quality is just exceptional. So I'm going to flush to that cow to get more females like that. If I got a cow that isn't really working for us, then that cow gets an embryo. put in her, and I'm making sure that we're keeping the quality of the female up that way. So, if I have a cow that I need to trim her feet, it's really fortunate for me because I can go to the dairy, they trim feet, and I bring her back and I put an embryo in her. Udders, I don't want to touch. So if her udders are bad, I put an embryo in her till I have to have a situation where I milk it out, and then I have my hired hand milk it out 1 year, and then that year that cow is no longer even a recip. She just goes to the sale barn. And so I feel like you can kind of see that fairly early on. You can see females that have borderline bags when they're young. If they're borderline bags when they're young, they're not going to be bags when they're older. So, I mean, I'll quit on a cow fairly early. If I've got a bred heifer now that I thought she was going to be an amazing female. I did not like her size as a first calf heifer. So I'm going to put an embryo in her. So, I mean, she had that one shot, and I can tell already, as a reset, I mean, a 1 or 2 year old, she's not going to have a good bag. I'm not going to wait 5 years and be like, oh yeah, I definitely should have put an embryo in her or got rid of her. I know that I'm not going to be selling bulls out of this female that had bad udders as a 2 year old. And so, that goes to when you call the guy that you're picking semen on, what are the females like that are in production? Well, if he doesn't have females in production, then I'm probably not going to use it unless it's from a bull that the sire was doing good with udders, and it's out of a cow that was doing good with udders.
Sure.
I mean, it really eliminates a lot of the bulls that I can use. I also don't trust people's opinion on feed anymore. I ask them to send me a video. If they can send me a video, great. If they can't send me a video, then I'm just not going to go off their word. And it's not because I feel like they're dishonest. I just feel like I have a different standard than most people for feet.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. I've heard it said that if you like their feet, keep looking, keep going up. But if you don't like their feet, you can stop right there. So, yeah. Jay, really good stuff. Really appreciate it. As I said, show notes page for today, workingcows.net/287. There will be links there to youngredangus.com. You can check out the bull sale catalog and see some of what Jay's been talking about here, as well as link to Jay's great YouTube channel and all the YouTube lives that he's done over there. Really, really good stuff that you've been producing good content for quite a while. And that's ultimately what it takes to get subscribers, is producing good content. So
I appreciate that.
Doing good. And so, yeah, we'll have links to all that in the show notes page. And Jay, anything else that you wanted to cover today?
Yeah, one other thing, I'll send you a link for the bull sale, and then I'll also send you a link for building a bioreactor that you can put in the show notes that kind of explains the 3 different processes that we use building a bioreactor. I think that'll be the best place for people to start, if they're wanting to build one.
Sure. Sounds good. We'll have it all there. So, Jay, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Very good stuff there. Very helpful. Really appreciate Jay taking the time to join me. Excited to start putting some of these things into practice on my own place. I really like that we're redeeming or reusing these totes and upgrading them for a greater purpose as far as using them to make Johnson Sioux bioreactors when they originally contained chemicals coming to our operation to fix management issues, and so now we can use them in this way. So that's pretty cool. Really excited next week to be joined once again by Troy Hadrick. Can't believe it's been this long, but Troy joined me a long time ago to talk about GeneMax testing and some of the things that they've been able to accomplish with pairing genetic pools from sires and dams and making some really efficient and effective cattle that way. But now we're going to talk to Troy about something that him and his wife have been doing of late. They've been on an adventure to start a USDA inspected slaughter facility in their own neighborhood there near Falkton, South Dakota. And this facility will be a USDA inspected slaughter facility for beef, pork, and bison. And I think they're going to be upwards of 25 head per day. And so giving people who are looking to direct market their beef an opportunity to come in and get some USDA inspected slaughtering done. And then that opens up the United States to you as far as clientele is concerned. And so we're going to talk to him about the process that they've been going through and kind of the timeline that they are operating on as far as when they hope to be able to start processing some cattle. So look forward to that coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows Podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.